let's talk about what happened yesterday. And I wanted to have both y'all on to talk about this. I have a bit of a different perspective, or maybe I don't. Maybe folks are on the same page as me, but let me just start here. I've heard people say this is our darkest day in America. I've heard people say this is not us. This is not who we are. And I don't believe it's our darkest day in America. Actually, I know it isn't our darkest day in America. Was it horrific? Was it terrible? Was it disturbing to see security guards, black security guards, running for their life like they're in a horror movie? To think about people hiding under a desk? Absolutely. That was egregious. But for me, this is the chickens coming home to roost, to borrow from Malcolm X, who got so much backlash when he made that statement. For me, I'm surprised it wasn't worse. I'm surprised I didn't see more. I was expecting this. And I get so disturbed when I hear people talk about our darkest day, when on this day in 1923, it was the last day of the Rosewood Massacre, where 150 black people were murdered, were killed, American citizens, by white terrorists. And a grand jury and a special prosecutor said, we don't have enough evidence to prosecute them. This is not our darkest day. And if you believe this is our darkest day, then you don't know our history. At a minimum, you don't know black history. So while it is horrible, while it is disturbing, some of the theatrics that I'm seeing, I just realized how far removed we are. When I think of darkest days that I've seen, when I saw Philando Castile die on Facebook Live, that was one of our darkest days. An image that I've only seen once and I can't get out of my mind. When I think about the knee in George Floyd's neck, when I think about the moment where George Zimmerman was acquitted for killing a child, a 17-year-old, for me, when I think of in 1992, when I'm 14, 15 years old, and I see Rodney King, I know it wasn't at the Capitol. I know it wasn't at a federal building, but that Capitol is going to be okay. They have the money and resources for it. So while I have compassion, and this shouldn't have happened, when I see police officers, it appears, allegedly, reportedly, letting people into the Capitol, I'm assuming they feel like it's peas in a pod. I'm assuming they're okay with it. I've been chased down, not chased down, I've been told to get out the way, standing too long at the Lincoln Memorial. So for me, this isn't our darkest day. And I want people to really, again, is it sad? Is it disturbing? Yes. But for me, the life that I live, being from West Philadelphia, when I think of MOVE, when I think of a block in Philadelphia being bombed in the 1980s by Philadelphia, by the city of Philadelphia, killing children, women and children. No, for me, it's not. I know the context is a federal building. I know that's the context. I get that. But that's not what it is for me. And then, with all due respect, I see Tim Kaine, as they're finally going to certify the Electoral College votes, thanking Kelly Loeffler, thanking her for finally getting some religion and realizing she was wrong. A woman who has insulted the black church for the past 4 or 5 months. And Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, you're thanking her? You're thanking her. So if you think this is our darkest day, then you really don't know us. Then you don't really know them. And I want to be crystal clear. I agree. It was disgusting. It was wrong. But at one point, you see the Confederate flag in the Capitol building. And folks said, this is the first time the Confederate flag has been in the Capitol building publicly. I said, oh, it is? I assume it's been in there thousands of times. See, that's where I'm coming from. Oh, this is the first time. Oh, okay. Well, it really doesn't matter if it's the first time or not, because the mindset, the danger, the evil was still there in that Capitol building. at some point. So I have compassion, I have understanding, but I just want to say the chickens have come home to roost, and they ain't done roosting. They still got some more work to do. So what I saw was not shocking to me. I said, okay, this is where we are. I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier, and I'm surprised that it wasn't worse. And I think for people out there who don't understand me saying that, you have to think, why would he feel that way? Because of what I know of history, because what I've seen in West Philadelphia in the 1980s, because what I know of Yusef Hawkins here in New York. Mm-hmm. So, no, it's not our darkest day. Maybe it is for you, and you have to think why it is for you. But for me, it's not. David Swerdlick, what are your thoughts?
Clay, I think everything you said is very powerful. I agree with you, certainly big picture. It is not our darkest day, and people who think of it as that, as you said, don't know history. It was a disgrace. I think in my lifetime, it's one of the saddest days in American politics, but not necessarily the saddest days in America. A couple of the specific things that happened yesterday, I might see a little differently than you, but big picture, I agree with you. And in terms of it being worse, I am glad that it wasn't worse, because after what we saw yesterday, you can imagine that someone could have fully opened fire from that crowd. Yeah. You can imagine that someone could have set off an explosive and it would have been exponentially worse and more tragic. So I am frankly glad that it wasn't worse, but we can't forget that one of the protesters was shot. We can't forget that there are police who were hospitalized. So it's not like it wasn't all bad. It was a dark day. Let me say this. If you want to get into it, I have a thought on that lone Black Capitol policeman who kind of retreated up the stairs. I actually think he did a good job, and I can explain it, but I don't want to belabor it right now. But let me know if you want to talk about that. Here's my thing about this. We've gotten to a place where everybody or so many people have incentives to do the wrong thing politically. And again, I'm pulling back from what you were saying, Clay, and just saying that one thing that Americans of all sides, I'm not trying to both sides it, need to get a handle on is, what are the incentives that are giving people the incentive to do the wrong thing? That's the senators who objected to the vote when it was a foregone conclusion that Biden and Harris won. That's the people who felt entitled to break into the Capitol while Congress was in session. That's police who didn't take it seriously when they would have had 3 or 4 or 5 times as many police for Black Lives Matter protests. It's everybody needs to look at what the incentives are and recalibrating how they look at these things. But back to your basic point, yeah, disgraceful, but there have been so many episodes where in our history, Black history, American history, generally, that were much worse for a lot of the reasons that you said. No question.
And let me just add too, that then I want to go to Reese. As far as Black folks, us protesting, we wouldn't even think to go to the Capitol building. We wouldn't even think to break into the Capitol building.
No.
We would say, if somebody brought that up, we would be like, bro, you crazy. Like, we ain't doing that. So it is this entitlement that
a group of black protesters might have gone to the police line.
Right.
It would not have occurred to a group of Black protesters to start throwing punches at police and ripping away those barricades, because the assumption would be, if we do that, we will at a minimum be beaten down and very likely shot. And so, no, that to me is where that entitlement comes in. No question.
Reese Colbert.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, this was not a spontaneous joyride of people through the Capitol. So I know that we've been bombarded with images of gleeful people. Some people want to call them protesters. They're seditionists, they're insurrectionists, they're rioters. Some of them are savages. Okay. I'm going to put it like that because that's how they put it when it comes to us, thugs and all kind of other stuff. But this was very coordinated. And, you know, the question is, who all is in on it? because Stephen A. Son, who is the chief of police of the Capitol Police, completely either abdicated his responsibility, he was either told to stand down, or he's in on it. But whatever the situation may be, that is just a massive, and I don't even want to call it a failure because failure is giving it too much of a benefit of the doubt. That is a massive, just, I'll put it like this: abdication. That's the most accurate word. Regardless of whether it was intentional or not, there was an abdication of responsibility. I've been in the Capitol. I was there on the first day of impeachment. I was in the Senate gallery. There is a massive amount of security. You can't even bring headphones in to the. You can't bring your cell phone. You can't bring anything in there. And so, what my concern isn't necessarily just the people that were in there taking selfies, even though I feel like they're equally to blame, because those people are giving cover to the people that were rummaging through the offices. Some people's computers were unlocked. What kind of USB drives were stolen? What kind of classified files were stolen? This is the halls of Congress where business is being attended to. So that's what I'm really concerned about. There is a massive national security breach that will likely remain classified. So the true damage will be unknown. We know that the Russians hacked the Department of Justice yesterday before all of this stuff started. So all of this stuff, to me, I just look at the fact that all of various agencies have been hacked recently. DOJ, like I said, was hacked yesterday. Then you have this infiltration into the Capitol. So there's something very, very serious afoot here that I think goes beyond just the images of being appalled at white people doing white people stuff, which is whatever the hell they want to do, and the white supremacy of it all. And then the last thing I just want to say is I've heard a lot of comments about, well, if this had been Black people, as if the cops or the police acted differently towards white people than they would have in the other circumstances. No, that's not true. Because in each case, the white supremacy and the protection of that is consistent. That's what this really boils down to. If you had a bunch of white people in there that was protesting other stuff, they probably would have got a little bit different response. They wouldn't have got the same response that Black people would have gotten. But the white people were in there to uphold a white nationalist government. And that is worth protecting. When it comes to the police, when it comes to our government, that's the side that they've always been on. That's why we got the police are out of slave patrols and things like that. So all of these things are consistent. So I just think we need to focus on, the white supremacy of it. That's the true danger. That's not going away, whether they go back to the Capitol or not. We still have these people that are infiltrated. Like Anderson Cooper said, they're going to go home to Holiday Inn and Olive Garden, and they just blend right back in with everybody else. But these are the people that are against an equal society, a just society, and a society in which Black and brown people are not second-class citizens.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I was thinking, I don't know what their strategy was, what their end game was, but I'm thinking, once you make it in the Capitol building and you're roaming the halls with your Confederate flag or your weapons or your crowbar, whatever it is, what were you going to do? If you would have came across Senator Kamala Harris, what were you going to do? If you would have came across Nancy Pelosi, I want to know, what was your plan? I mean, some folks are trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan. What was the plan when you got in there? And to me, I'm not a lawyer. I've never been in a courtroom in that way, but that sounds like there's some kind of premeditation involved.
Oh, yeah.
You have weapons.
They had zip ties.
Zip ties.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If you would have saw Senator Cory Booker, what were you going to do to Senator Cory Booker? It's dangerous. It's not shocking. And that's why when I say our darkest day, well, you really have to understand how these days work in this country,
Mm-hmm.
and what their real agenda was. Because it appears that it was violence. And I guess at this point, what did they say? They said 20-some folks have been arrested, or is it 30-something? I heard 20-some folks have been arrested. How much is it now?
It's in
I'm
the
not
50s.
sure what the count is, but
Yeah,
it's a small number. It's a small number.
But those people were not arrested at the Capitol. Those people were arrested in D.C. The Capitol, they just gave him carte blanche. Okay, y'all can go, come and go, whatever you want to do.
I will say this, Clay. I agree with you that it doesn't seem like it was. Well, I agree with Reese said it wasn't spontaneous, right? People, somebody in that crowd had a plan to do what they did, even if not everybody in the crowd had that plan. That's
Right.
number one. It wasn't spontaneous. It's been planned, and people have reported on this for weeks on message boards and in different forums and on Facebook. And to your point, Clay, this was not a situation where people just lost their heads or whatever. They want a mission. But I do think if we just take the fact that they didn't have an end game, let's not say they didn't have a plan. In some ways, it's a metaphor for Trumpism in general. There was no end game. It's all about showing maximum rage. The entire Trump movement, to a certain extent, has no end game. It's about a big temper tantrum about not wanting to accept the reality of where we are as a country now, racially, gender, sexual orientation, the economy, foreign policy. It's a middle finger to the fact that the world is changing with no end game, pure id. And in some ways, not always, that is what I saw playing out yesterday in the Capitol building. People wanting to throw a tantrum and show maximum rage, including being violent, destroying property, and harming people physically, but just to be out of a self-appointed sense of rage about nothing based in reality. And that in some ways is what makes it so dangerous. It's that you, even if you wanted to, and I'm not saying you should, you can't negotiate with that because it's not a reasonable demand. It's not, oh, we would like to take our case to court. You already took your case to court.
Right.
It's not, oh, we don't like the way our candidates have been serving us, because your candidates are the one ginning up your conspiracy theories. And so in that way, I see the no end game as being representative of a bigger problem with that entire movement.
But wait, can I just say, I don't know if it's fair to say that they don't have an end game, just because, as a hallmark to your point of Trumpism, they're incompetent, and they didn't succeed. But we don't know what exactly was accomplished outside of the cameras. They were in there for hours. They were in various Senate offices. There were fast thinking, as they said, aides that actually protected the votes. They were in the Senate chamber. They were in the House chamber. They were all up and through there. They're in the Capitol Visitor Center. And so we don't know what they actually were in there for. At least the ones that we need to worry about.
That's a fair point.
We don't know what they were up to, but we know that they were in there and they had a lot of access to a lot of stuff that it would take a diversion, like a whole bunch of crazy ass Trump people with flags waving around, being useful idiots and being complicit and co-conspirators. They're not knowing what the hell is going on. That's not who we need to be worried about, because we have long known, and Russia and anybody who ever wants to infiltrate our country knows the way you go in is through these white extremists. And so that's why we have to really be concerned. It's not going to be self-evident in the images that we saw on what was going to happen. We may not ever know what the ultimate end game or the ultimate result of those actions were, but it was not something that we can just assume because it failed to succeed, that they didn't accomplish whatever it is that they were trying to accomplish. The people that are really sinister.
I understand what
you know what. You know what really has outraged me. I mean, again, what I saw there was disgusting. But I have heard pundits say, "Oh my gosh, this looks like a third world country. Oh my gosh, this looks like Iraq. Oh my gosh, this looks like." I'm like, y'all realize part of the reason why they had those uprisings is because of policies that we put in place. Do you realize that? You're so taken aback by, oh, it looks like Iraq. You realize that we've tried to install governments, and now you're saying we look like one of them. We're one of them. We're now look how far we've fallen. Now we're one of them. These third world, quote unquote, which I hate that term.
No, it's not
normally brown. Normally, say what you want to say. This looks like Haiti. This looks like some Muslim country. Say what you really want to say. So as I'm seeing the dialogue of the narrative, and there are some pundits who I really love and adore and respect, I just think that clearly you don't know us. Clearly you don't know how these chickens come home to roost. You don't know it. And the other thing is that here we are what are going to be the repercussions?
Not a damn
When there was
thing.
the exactly when
Sorry.
there was the no, say it. When there was an insurrection in Wilmington, North Carolina,
Right.
and those white terrorists took over Wilmington, North Carolina, one of the leaders of the insurrection becomes the
Became the
mayor of
governor.
Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Oh, was it the governor?
Oh, sorry. You might be right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fact check me
But
on that Twitter. Yeah.
he becomes a leader within the legislature of North Carolina.
Mhm.
So Trump is going to be out, but what are we doing with Mitch McConnell,
Mhm.
with Lindsey Graham, with Jim Jordan? What's any kind of repercussions? Is there going to be anything? And when I realize there won't be, that's why I say this is us. This is who we are. This isn't our darkest day, because we've had other days that were pretty morbid and there were no repercussions. Carolyn Bryant is still living her racist life in Mississippi, allegedly. The woman who got Emmett Till killed.
Mhm.
Show me a repercussion. And not just Jason Van Dyke when it took months and months to get that in Chicago for shooting Laquan McDonald. Not just one. Give me a collective of it. Amber Geiger gets a hug by a judge in a courtroom. So I think of repercussions, how it manifests, what it looks like. And that is what really outrages me. Because if you understood white supremacy, if you understood the structural underpinnings of race in this country, you would know that it goes beyond the moment. And it is anybody penalized for it. They're literally trying to reinvent Bush's history, reinvent Reagan's history. All
Mhm.
the and mind you,
And Trump's in front of our eyes.
right.
Yeah,
And
too. Yes.
Bush and Reagan they are literally the hate that Trump created. No,
Mhm.
I'm sorry. It was created by Bush and Reagan, by Nixon. This makes perfect sense. We'd get to this.
Mhm.
So if they can walk away with no repercussions, whether it's the 25th Amendment, whether it's impeachment, whatever the case may be, I feel like it's not going to happen. And then we have Tim Kaine thinking, Kelly Loeffler. So what are we going to do?
Right.
How are we going to show up?
I mean, the FBI is sitting up there talking about, oh, can y'all help us find these people? The same FBI that got all our damn information.
Right.
Come on. Now
Right.
all of a sudden y'all know how to find people? Come
Do
on.
you want to find them?
Exactly.
David, let me ask you, then we'll go to a call. 25th Amendment. Is it possible? Do we think it's going to happen? Or are they just babbling a talking point and then by Monday it'll be something else?
I think it's sort of in between. I don't have the 25th Amendment memorized. I've looked at it enough over the last couple of years that I know that for your listeners, they should look at Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. That's the process for involuntarily, temporarily investing the presidential powers with the vice president. There are other ways it can be used, right? In past, both presidents Bush voluntarily gave up the power for a few days when they went under general anesthesia for surgery, that kind of thing.
Right.
In the way people are talking about it now, Clay, I think the problem is that there's not enough time. Trump's only around as president for another 2 weeks. This is a process by which, one, the vice president and a majority of the cabinet have to be, in agreement to move forward with it. Number two, they can notify Congress that the president is incapable of carrying out his duties. Then the president can respond within 4 days. Then if there's a dispute about that, there's another period where, Congress, there's, I don't know if it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but there's another period by which the two sides can dispute whether the president can carry out his duties. I just don't think there's time to carry it out. And even though you could make a case that Trump is incapable of carrying out his duties, the 25th Amendment contemplates someone either being physically incapacitated or mentally incapacitated. Lots of people would make the case that Trump is mentally incapacitated, but I think Trump and his supporters would still make an argument that you may not like him, you may think he's a wild man, but he's not incapable of carrying out his job. So the short answer to your question is, it's an interesting thing to discuss, and it's not out of the realm of possibility. It seems very, very unlikely.
Let's go to a call here. Let's rock it to, where are we? Tony, South Carolina, first-time caller. What up, Tony?
What's up, Clay? Good afternoon.
Hey. All right.
I looked at the insurrection yesterday. Just in awe. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. In a way, I still have a hard time imagining what happened. And let me to just answer a quick question. You know, the MAGA folks that were roaming around the state capitol, have they run into any, you know, Nancy Pelosi or Cory Booker, or Kamala Harris or whomever? I don't think they were going to give them a hug. I really don't.
No.
You know, I think there might have been some ill will. Now, I don't know if that would have involved screaming or cussing at them or something along those lines, but I don't think they had any good intentions once they broke through. I really don't.
I agree, brother. I agree. I completely agree. Reese, can you just tell folks, I said it on air, but it was your tweet, so I'd love for you to say it. Folks who are trying to blame Mayor Bowser for what happened at the Capitol, can you just explain that she had
Yes.
nothing, she couldn't do anything with it?
Thank you. Thank you. You know, one of my pet peeves in life, and one thing I strive to do with Black women views is push back on this Black boogie woman narrative. We've had white supremacy in this country since they landed on Plymouth Rock, okay? You don't need a Black woman to be the bad guy when you have a whole bunch of crazy white folks storming the Capitol. But the way that DC works is there are District of Columbia grounds, right? And then there are federal grounds that are completely within the jurisdiction of the federal government. Now, in some areas, there is a joint jurisdiction, a joint cooperation between the Capitol Police and the Metro PD. But the Capitol, the US Capitol building, is not one of those places. That is under the sole jurisdiction of the US Capitol Police. So once they got to that initial police line, the jackets said US Capitol. They did not say MPD. We know MPD will bust some heads open, okay? Them people are not shy about macing the hell out of people, tear gassing people, and being violent. That's how, you know, city police officers are. I'm not excusing that, but I'm just saying. So that is not anything that has anything to do with Muriel Bowser, okay? She did her job. You did not have these incidents of violence playing out throughout the city of DC. You had it happening specifically on the Capitol grounds. She offered to bring in assistance, to bring in tactical assistance, but that was slow walk. That's why I say, you know, they always want to bring up the Black woman, Stephen A. Sund, okay, S-U-N-D. That is the chief of police. That's who you need to be talking to. Okay, they should have had all of these preparations in place. They slow walked even getting the Metro PD and the DC National Guard involved. It actually took time for even Muriel Bowser to get additional DC National Guard support because the mission had changed. So that has to go up through the Defense Department. There are a lot of layers of bureaucracy that come into play, but it was an abdication of responsibility of Stephen A. Sund to properly plan for this. And part of it, I think, goes to the fact that generally speaking, white people look at other white people as benign, as entitled to freedom of speech, or you're just expressing your opinion, and they feel very uncomfortable with using brute force on them the way that they do on us. They don't like the images of you. They shot one person because she was literally going through the galley. And she wasn't some meek and mild, oh, she just an innocent little, you know, homemaker baking brownies. She was military trained, so she knew better than to be doing what she was doing. But they don't feel comfortable with images of that. You can't have 20, 30 white people shot on the Capitol, okay? They don't like the way that sounds. So that's on them. It has nothing to do with Muriel Bowser. You didn't see what was happening in DC. You didn't see what happened in Capitol happening in DC. Muriel, she did a press conference today. She has been outstanding with what she can do. You can't just crack heads because they step foot in the city of DC. All right, you gotta do certain things. There are protocols and things like that. She followed everything she's supposed to follow. So if y'all want somebody's head on the platter, go talk to Stephen A. Sund, who hasn't done a press conference. He hasn't had a press release. There's no answer to what happened, why they abdicated their responsibility. That's who you need to be mad at, not Muriel Bowser, period.